Hi, my name is Bill Egan, and today's video is going to be a question and answer video all about the Cahokia Mounds State Historic Site. So let's get started. Question number one, why is Cahokia Mounds so important? What a great question to start with. Cahokia Mounds State Historic Site is important because number one, it was America's first city. Number two, it's the oldest prehistoric Indian site in the United States. Number three, it is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. There's only 24 World Heritage Sites in the United States. Cahokia Mounds is one of them. It's a very important site. What were the Indians called that lived at Cahokia Mounds? Well, we don't know what they called themselves, but archaeologists call them Mississippians. That's a name given to them by archaeologists because of their culture, their way of life. It's not a tribal name. How did the first Indians get here? Well, there's several theories about that. Two of the most popular theories are that during the Ice Age, when the water between what is now Russia and Alaska froze over, animals came across that land bridge. Asians followed them, and they came down into North America, and that's one of the beliefs. The other is that the Indians actually came down the west coast in dugout canoes to get here. Were they the first people? Were the Mississippians the first people to live in this area? No, they were not. There were prior cultures before them. Paleo was the first, Archaic the second, Woodland was the third, and then came the Mississippians. How many Mississippians lived here in this area? At Cahokia Mounds State Historic Site, there were approximately 15,000 to 20,000 Indians living there. Now, if you include the Indians that lived around the mounds in East St. Louis, there was about 50 mounds in East St. Louis, about 25 mounds in St. Louis. That number could be as high as 60,000 when you consider it as the greater Cahokia. Who are the Mississippians' descendants? We don't know for sure. There's several tribes that claim to have linkage back to the Mississippians. Certainly the Osage is one of those tribes that's working hard to prove that they are. What was the lifespan of the average Mississippians? For men it was about 40 years, for women it was about 35 years. How tall were the men? How tall were the women? The men typically were about 5'6", the women maybe 5'1", 5'2". Why is it called Cahokia Mounds? Great question. It was about 200 years after the Mississippians left the Cahokia Mounds State Historic Site, what we call it today, that the Indians from Illinois called Cahokia settled in the area. And when the Europeans got here and they found the Cahokia Indians, that tribe in the area, they called it Cahokia Mounds, and the name stuck. When did Cahokia Mounds become a state park? Cahokia Mounds became a state park in 1925, and at that time it was approximately 144 acres. Today, Cahokia Mounds State Park consists of about 2,200 acres. Who gives the best tours of Cahokia Mounds? Well, I think we all know the answer to that one, so I'm not even going to answer. When did excavations begin at Cahokia Mounds? In the 1800s, there was a lot of amateur archaeologists, but it wasn't until the 1920s that professional archaeologists started digging at the mounds. Did Mexico influence the buildings of the mounds at Cahokia? To the best of our knowledge, there's been no evidence that Mexico influenced the building of the mounds. Do you still have excavations there? Yes, about every year there's usually about maybe one or two. The last few years, Mound 34 has seen a lot. There's also been excavations to give evidence of where the stockade wall made its turn, and those seem to go on quite often. You can call the site to get specifics if you'd like to visit and maybe even be a part of those excavations. How many mounds were built at Cahokia Mounds? We had about 120 mounds. Today there's about 84 left, and of the 84, 72 are within the perimeter of the park, so they are protected. Why were so many mounds destroyed? That's because over the years there was a lot of people that felt improvement and progress was much more important than the preservation of the past. So today, preserving the past is one of the big challenges we have at Cahokia Mounds. Did men and women have different jobs? They did. Women seemed to do more farming and made a lot of the pottery, while the men were busier hunting, fishing, and making tools. What were their clothes made of? Typically animal hides, a lot of deer, and a lot of rabbit. Where did all the dirt come from that they built the mounds? From the ground. That's a little mound joke. The dirt was taken from what we call borrow pits. We have approximately 20 borrow pits at Cahokia Mounds, the biggest one being 17 acres and about 6 or 8 feet deep. But the dirt was borrowed from those pits to build a mound. Sometimes the Indians would fill up those borrow pits with their trash and maybe seal it off and even build a mound on top of the old borrow pit. Other times they just let it fill up with water. Did they play any games? Yes, they did. They played a game called Chunky. It was played in the Grand Plaza and probably other plazas. It's a little round disc that they would roll, and Indians would take their spears and throw their spears trying to get the spear to stick where the chunky stone would stop. It was a game that they probably considered like their national pastime. 15 chunky stones were found in Mound 72. Sometimes folks ask, how do you know they were playing a game of Chunky 1,000 years ago? Because they did find chunky stones buried in Mound 72. We have some pottery that has images of people playing Chunky, and Native American Indians were still playing the game when the Europeans arrived. How did Monk's Mound get its name? Great question. Between 1809 and 1813, there were some French Trappist monks that came to the area. They were living on Mound 48 with intentions to build a monastery on Monk's Mound, on what we now call Monk's Mound. They had a lot of difficulty, a lot of problems with disease. The crops wouldn't grow. Eventually they went back to France, but apparently had left a great impression because the big mound at Cahokia Mounds was named Monk's Mound in honor of those French Trappist monks. How big is Monk's Mound? Monk's Mound is 100 feet high. Its base covers 14 acres, which means at the base, Monk's Mound is even larger than the Great Pyramids in Egypt. They built Monk's Mound by carrying baskets of dirt on their back, and we have a question, how many baskets of dirt did it take to build Monk's Mound? 14.5 million baskets of dirt just to build Monk's Mound. Is anyone buried in Monk's Mound? There are people buried in Monk's Mound, but none of them are Mississippians to our knowledge. They were either Cahokians or people after the Europeans arrived here. How many steps are there to the top of Monk's Mound? There are 156 to get to the top. Why did they build the mounds? Well, the Mississippians built 3 different types of mounds. They built platform mounds, which are the ones that are flat on top. Those are built for important buildings. Could have been a temple, a sweat lodge, a charnel house, what we think of as like a funeral parlor or funeral home, or maybe the house of the chief. They also built conical mounds. These are the mounds that are kind of cone-shaped. They're round, and those are burial mounds. The third type of mound they built, we only have 6 of them at Cahokia, and they're not typically found anywhere else, are called ridgetop mounds. Ridgetop mounds are long and narrow, come to a point at the top like the roof of a house. Typically those mounds seem to have been placed to give points of reference to the site, north, south, east, and west, at the limits of the city, but they also have, it's turned out, have also been burial mounds, as in Mound 72. Did they have any kind of dishes at all? Well, sure, they had pottery that they made, the different types of dishes, bowls, and bottles. And their pottery was kind of unique, so when shards of pottery are found, you can identify which culture that might have been producing them. How did we get to know what they wore, what they looked like? Because even though these are prehistoric Indians, which means they left no written record behind, they did leave behind pottery that had images of people, so we kind of know what they look like. Some of the shells, the marine shells from the Gulf Coast, had sketches and drawings that kind of show us the kind of dress that people had and how they had ear spools and things of that nature. All evidence of those artifacts. What did they eat? Ate a lot of deer, rabbit, a lot of different types of seeds like sunflower seeds, squash. Corn was a big part of their diet. A lot of nuts, a lot of berries, and of course fish and different types of birds. Were any people sacrificed at Cahokia Mounds? The evidence appears as though the answer is yes. If you get a chance to go to Cahokia Mounds, be sure and see the exhibit at Mound 72, where they talk about almost 300 burials in a very small ridgetop mound, many of which appear to be sacrificed. Did they have a religion or a belief system? And apparently they did. In 1971, while trying to repair the east side of Monk's Mound, where there had been some sloping problems, they discovered a little tablet, which are rarely found, called the Birdman tablet. And on this tablet, on one side of it, it shows the face of a man. It looks like he's in a bird costume, representing the two worlds that they believed in, which was the middle world, that's where we live, that's why the man, his face is on that tablet, and the upper world, which is represented by the bird costume he's wearing. And on the back of the Birdman tablet, it looks like a snakeskin representing the lower world or underworld. So their belief system was that there was a middle world where we lived, the underworld or lower world, and then the upper world. What did they smoke in their pipes? They have found pipes, and we do know they smoked tobacco and other substances in those pipes. Why did they build the stockade wall? Interesting question. The stockade wall or palisade was almost 2 miles long. It was about 12 feet high. It took almost 20,000 trees to build it, and they built it 4 times while they were at Cahokia. But they didn't build that wall till after they had been there for almost 200 years. So why would you build that wall after being there that long? The belief is that it was built probably for 2 reasons. One was for defensive purposes. It did have bastions or guard towers about every 85 feet, where the Indians could stand on the platform and monitor who came and went. We also believe it might have been a kind of a social barrier. If you were part of the elite, you were probably living inside the stockade wall. If you're just common folks, then you were living on the outside. What is Woodhinge? Woodhinge is a solar calendar that the Mississippians built. You can see a reproduction of it about 1 mile from the interpretive center. It's a circle of posts that's used to determine, most importantly, probably the spring equinox and the fall equinox. It also can be used to determine the summer and winter solstice and other dates that were important to them for festivals and rituals, things like that. Why can't we sled down Monk's Mound or any of the mounds anymore? Well, we found out that sledding down the mounds really does destroy a lot of it, causes erosion problems, but more importantly, we have to recognize that these mounds are sacred to a lot of Native American Indians, so we want to respect that. Were there any women chiefs? Yes, there were. When Hernando de Soto came here in around 1540 and was going through the southeast, he came upon a group of people that were actually Mississippians. It was in the very late Mississippian period for that part of the country. And there was a woman, lady, that they called her the Lady Cahokia. And he actually met her. Her and her people tried to take care of him and his people, but unfortunately, the way it ended, he kidnapped her, but she was able to get away. It's an interesting story, worth reading. Was flooding a problem? Is that why they built the mounds? Because it's close to the Mississippi River and the Illinois River, the Missouri River, was a lot of flooding? And the answer is no. For the most part, while they lived at Cahokia Mounds, there's no evidence of flooding being a problem. However, about the time they finally started leaving, there is evidence of some flooding. But it was pretty much about the time that they were getting ready to leave the area. What was the demise of the Mississippians at Cahokia? We don't know for sure. Some of the reasons that have been given by archaeologists is, number one, there was this little ice age around 1300 where the temperature changed, the moisture changed. It probably had a big effect on their crops. Eating too much corn, corn was a big part of their diet after about 900 AD. Eating too much corn means a lot of sugars, a lot of carbs, not much protein. From examining teeth, it's apparent they had a lot of disease and problems associated with a poor diet. There could have been some political strife. And using up all their natural resources, all the wood that they used to build the houses they built and the stockade wall, all the fires that they kept going, they used a tremendous amount of wood. So using up their natural resources was probably another problem. It was probably a combination of all of those that caused their demise. Do you have any other questions? My contact information will be at the end of this. Hope you've enjoyed this video. Hope you'll go down to the mounds and visit it personally. Check the website or give them a call to check on the hours of operation, any special events that are coming about. It's a wonderful place to take the family. I do want to give some special credit to Bill Eisminger, who has helped me so much in all of this work and study of the Cahokia Mounds. Thank you for watching, and remember, those mounds have been waiting for your visit for 1,000 years.